Despite losing 4 of last season's back 5 to Liverpool, Arsenal, PSG and Real Madrid, Bournemouth remain one of the most impressive teams in the Premier League. So today, I'm going to be breaking down Iraola's setup in Tactics Explained. Remember to subscribe if you're new, but anyway, let's get this party started. Without the ball, Bournemouth drop into a 4-4-2 defensive block. From here they adopt a man-to-man pressing scheme, but unlike most man-to-man schemes, if a player jumps to press, they continue to squeeze with a teammate picking up their old marker. In play, Bournemouth use their striker to cut the pitch in half and dictate which side they want the opposition to play down, often leaving an opponent free to receive. From here they press against the touchline to stop ball progression, and with no short passing options available, it leaves the opponents with a choice. Do they play a low percentage pass, often a long ball to their striker to contest with the centre-backs, or do they try and play through Bournemouth's press? If they do try and play through, Iraola's men engage aggressively in midfield to win the ball back through tackles before quickly counter-attacking. Not only are Bournemouth well drilled, but Iraola's plan is an effective one. The Cherries rank 2nd for PPDA and 3rd for challenge intensity in the Premier League this season. 2 key metrics for pressing that measure defensive actions per the opposition pass. So whilst Bournemouth start in a 4-4-2 defensive block, the nature of their man-to-man press means their pressing structure adapts to the opposition build-up. So let's start with Bournemouth pressing a double pivot with a back 4. So in terms of Iraola's shape and structure, if we have it in a really basic formation perspective, it's a 4-2-3-1. But obviously that creates a mismatch in midfield. So what Iraola's side does to adapt to this structure, of course the number 6 and the number 8 dropping deep into midfield to get on the ball, is they basically push one of the central midfielders up to jump on the 8 and the attacking midfielder sits over the 6. So in terms of the structure, what we tend to see as well is both of the wingers playing in a slightly deeper defensive position, allowing them to be kind of aggressive, allowing them to press the fullback if they need to. But this is kind of the shape. It's almost like a 4-3-2-1. But also in terms of what Bournemouth do, like they did against Brighton in the Premier League this season when playing a double pivot in build-up, is they used Evanilson to cut the pitch. Why that's so important is it allows Bournemouth to be more effective in their man-to-man structure. So how that kind of happens, Evanilson will usually play kind of on the right-hand side of the pitch in Bournemouth shape, and he'll press the football, obviously closing off the passing angles behind him to force the goalkeeper to play down the left. What you see with Bournemouth, as you see in many good pressing structures, is having a compact shape, but also overloading the opposition. So what Bournemouth will do, they'll shift their entire team over to kind of that side of the pitch, which allows them to be super effective in their pressing. So again, they maintain that kind of man-to-man nature in central midfield. Against Brighton, you had Ruta that played off Danny Welbeck, who dropped deep. Of course, Adams picked him up, and the rest of the team would shift over into really good defensive positions. But in terms of what Bournemouth do as well, not only do we have this kind of man-to-man shape that thus, if for example, the opposition are playing out, you'll tend to see them be really aggressive in these central midfield areas. Not only that, but let's say the 4 is receiving on the edge of the box, like you tend to see with a goal kick. What you'll see with Tavernier is he'll press off that number 6. In this shape and structure, he is the guy triggering the press. As soon as he goes, Bournemouth becomes super aggressive. Where, for example, if the ball drops into the 8 and the pass to the 6 is on, you'll see Adams jump. But consequently now there's a new free man. So what you'll tend to see is one of the centre-backs stepping up into midfield and Bournemouth being super man-to-man in these areas. What I like about Bournemouth, not only in the game against Brighton where they were forcing Brighton to play down the left-hand side of their shape, again getting a tactical advantage in that area, but he's very adaptable versus shape and structure, but also against opposition. So now let's look at Bournemouth versus a single pivot. Again, Iraola is very adaptable versus how their opponents build up. Good example of this was this season against Tottenham Hotspur, who under their new manager Thomas Frank have decided to build with a single pivot. So what we're talking about there from basic sense is a number 6 sitting deep and an 8 and a number 10 a little bit higher up the pitch. Of course, Bournemouth could press like this. They could press in a 4-2-3-1 and it would be effective. But we all know that the 4-4-2 diamond is the elite level shape versus that structure. What tends to happen with Bournemouth when facing these kind of build-up structures is you'll see Evanilson and Tavernier playing as the 2 forwards in the shape. You'll see both wingers dropping back into better defensive positions, and then usually Scott jump jumping high into a number kind of 10 position, and this is how they press. Once again, they try and force you down one side. I really like this from Iraola. The game against Tottenham, what we tended to see was that Bournemouth wanted to funnel Spurs down their left-hand side. Van de Ven is weaker than Romero on the ball, and of course Jed Spence, who played in the game, is far weaker than Pedro Porro. One of Spurs' tactics that works really well this season is Pedro Porro getting the ball and playing it into the channel. So how did Bournemouth stop that weapon? Of course, they forced Spurs down that side. Again, it came from one of the forwards cutting the pitch in half. Again, a key principle of pressing structures is forcing your opponents down one side of the pitch, then creating that kind of tactical advantage. Of course, from those positions, you'd see the likes of Evanilson being very orientated on the ball and pressing the football, and Bournemouth really trying to force them down the side to then jump on. Again, very man-to-man. If the 6 comes over, Scott goes with him. If the 8 even drops deeper, you'll saw Adams will take a high position. Sometimes you tended to see this kind of shape, which is absolutely crazy. That is both of your two central midfielders jumping high and being so aggressive. That's why Bournemouth is so good in the press. The intensity, but also the aggression in central midfield. Big shout out to Tyler Adams, who's been fantastic this season. And of course, there is other issues. You know, let's say your right back's moved over, both centre-backs are there, you've tucked your left-back in as well. If a 9 drops off into this space, or the number 10 drops off to the space, what you'll tend to see if both do that is you'll see both centre-backs going high and the 2 full-backs being in deeper positions. This is a new tactical trend of this season, that being that, both the wingers are kind of deeper than the 2 central midfielders, and both the full-backs are deeper than the 2 centre-backs. We've evolved pressing structures. Thomas Frank is doing this as well at Spurs, and they've got one of the most effective presses in the league. Iraola is doing that against Bournemouth. And what this tends to mean, of course, is you're going to be forcing a lot of long balls high up the pitch, or they're going to play inside and you're going to be able to turn the ball over high and transition quickly, which is exactly what Iraola's side wants to do. But once again, there's adaptability when Bournemouth face a back 3. Take our example from the Manchester United game just at the end of last season. Bournemouth went away from their kind of 4-2-4 structure and defended more of a bit of a 5 at the back, 2 in midfield and 3 up top. Of course, that was created by, let's say Semenyo dropping back to more of a, wing back position, Bournemouth building a back 3, pushing the left back forward and having a narrow front 3, of course, to press the opponent. In terms of this, it basically, once again, is man-to-man all over the pitch. It allows Bournemouth to play super high. And what it did for Manchester United, not only did it create a goal, but it forced them into aimless long balls that Bournemouth would simply turn the ball over. But the principle's exactly the same. Man-for-man in midfield, man-for-man from a pressing perspective high. And what you tend to see as well when Man United built in a slightly different shape, of course, from their goalkeeper, when they push one of their centre-backs into the midfield and kick their midfield on. Of course, you saw adaptability for Bournemouth, with one of the forwards dropping off the line and then either Scott or Adams dropping deep to pick up that number 8. Again, this adaptability is so important from the Premier League. Since the start of the 23-24 season, Bournemouth ranked first across Europe's top 5 leagues for shot-creating actions following a defensive action. As much as this stat has its flaws, it shows not only how frequently Bournemouth turn over the ball, but also how direct they are when they want it back. Because a shot-creating action only takes into account 2 actions before the shot, one of which is usually a pass. And if stats aren't your bag, let's take a look at an in-game example. Regardless of the setup, the general principles are the same. Take Evanilson's goal against Manchester City in last season's FA Cup. First and foremost, there is aggression on the ball. Bournemouth want to make it uncomfortable for you when playing out from the back. So we've got the left back jumping on Phil Foden that's come off the line to help City's build-up structure. But as soon as he puts pressure on the ball, he forces City once again with his own pressure to have less time. And we can see at this moment, as he curves his run to force City to play backwards, all the options are cut off. Bournemouth are man-to-man in midfield. Of course, the fullback has covered Phil Foden in behind him, and you've got Evanilson cutting the pitch and splitting Manchester City. What this means is it's forcing a low percentage pass under pressure. The switch out is how you can deal with most pressing structures that deal in a compact manner, but again, it's low percentage. And what we see here is the pass from Nunez is played across, and Lewis Cook jumps, anticipating that pass from right fullback and motors into the final third. He plays David Brooke in behind the defence that takes one touch and clips the ball to the back post, that gets a little bit of a knockdown, and Evanilson is there to finish off the move. Superb pressure on one of the best build-up teams in the world of football. As much as I could go on all day talking about Iraola's press, I think people who watch the Premier League know how good it is. What's more interesting to me is what they do when they've got the ball. In possession, Bournemouth create a 4-2-4, although depending on the number 8, this can become a 4-1-4-1. The intent is to play direct as quickly as possible, and all of Bournemouth's actions are played at a high tempo. Their two ball-playing centre-backs generally orchestrate possession moves from deep, with their full-back swingers and attacking midfielders forming wide triangles. From here, the centre-backs either play line-breaking passes into the feet of forwards, or they spread the play to the full-backs, who use ball carries and passing combinations in the wide triangles to quickly progress the play. However, more commonly we see the centre-backs, in particular Marcus Senesi, playing kick and run, that being playing long and direct passes to the wingers or forwards running in behind. The intent of this pass isn't necessary to find its target. Instead, Bournemouth flood the target area with bodies to win the second ball, bypassing the pressure, progressing the play and creating panic in the opposition with their dynamic attacking style. And I love this kick and rush approach from Iraola. When Klopp's Liverpool were in their early gegenpressing era, teams would give Liverpool the ball and say, "You can't press us, try and break us down." This is why we saw Klopp develop his possession game with a lot of rotation in midfield. But Iraola's kick and rush also solves this problem. By going long, Iraola forces counter-pressing moments. Lumping a ball forward can result in a number of different situations. First up, Semenyo, let's say, who is a natural mismatch versus the opposition's fullback due to his height and size and ability in the air, could flick the ball on to one of the other attackers. Alternatively, if he's able to bring the ball down, he's excellent 1v1 and fantastic at dribbling at the opposition. But let's say the opposition win that ball and let's create a second kind of ball situation. You know, we've had a long ball up the pitch from Bournemouth, the opposition defender's won it and he's flicked it back into this zone. Why Bournemouth is so effective on these second ball situations is down to a number of reasons, but the main thing is they compact their team and they have more bodies around the ball than the opposition. So what we tend to see when Bournemouth are building out from the back with 3 players is they'll use the goalkeeper in a possession sense, again to draw the opposition's first line of pressure towards them. But also the positioning of both fullbacks is really high, which means that they can support the player ahead of them, especially whichever flank Semenyo is playing on. So from these long ball situations, what we also see as well is the attacking midfielder in Tavernier and Evanilson moving over to that zone, supported by the defensive midfielder, usually Adams at the base of midfield. What this creates versus the opposition is a massive overload, which means that Bournemouth naturally, if let's say that long ball is played forward to the fullback wins it, there is more Bournemouth players in the proximity to win the ball than the opposition. This is a super effective tactic. And this is really effective because not only have you taken out the opponent's strikers, but you've also taken out their midfield and you're free to carry on the back line. You can create very good faux counter-attacking situations. And from these positions, in terms of Bournemouth winning that second ball, as we mentioned before, they can be very, very direct and carry. One of the big things that Iraola wants his team to do, if the patterns of play are not available, to drive through, create chaos in these moments, which is possible. Or alternatively, let's say Tavernier is a little bit more wider and Evanilson's bring the ball down. One of the big things of Bournemouth as well, when they're receiving long balls or they've won the second ball, they'll lay off very, very quickly, which opens up moments to quickly switch the play to the other side. And already on that left-hand side of the pitch, there's a great relationship between Tufer and Brooks in terms of finding that underlapping run from the fullback. This just allows Bournemouth to not mess about at the back and play direct and win the second ball. But instead of talking about it, let's show you an example against Brighton. So we pick up the play with Petrovic on the ball. He's created a back three with the 2 Bournemouth centre-backs. There's going to be pressure from Danny Welbeck, Brighton's striker. As Petrovic draws in that pressure, he opens himself up to play a long ball up the pitch. This is where Bournemouth have already moved to the zone. They know that he's going to find Semenyo, and this game is playing on the right wing. So as the long ball comes in, you can already see the Bournemouth players around the ball. In shot, we've got Semenyo, who's contesting the long ball. Evanilson's moved over to that side. Tavernier's moved over to the side, and the fullback supporting him is just behind. And just out of shot, you've also got Tyler Adams. Of course, Semenyo wings the flick. It drops to Evanilson, who heads the ball back. We're talking about quick layoffs after the direct pass. It's something that's a real trend in how Bournemouth play, because if you do that quickly, it can allow the attacking midfielder in behind to link it. Tavernier is a fantastic footballer, works supremely well off the ball, but he's a really good connector. He ships it to the on-rushing Alex Scott, who's the number 8 in this game, who plays wide. That switch of play has created a 1v1 situation, but just look at the left back as well. Truffert moves so quickly in these types of situations to create a 2v1. He's very good at underlapping the play, but that's kind of been in a lot of Bournemouth's players underlapping wide runs. But instead, David Brooks does cut inside. He's got that 1v1 situation and gets back to Alex Scott in central midfield, who's moved into a higher 8 position. You can already see Bournemouth have loaded the box pretty well so far. There's 2 players, one on the edge. Alex Scott rolls over the ball, plays wide to Truffert, who's held his position. Instantly crosses into the box, a tactic of Bournemouth. And as you can see in this situation, there are players on the edge that could potentially have the knockdown for a shot on goal, but this time, Evanilson heads himself towards the goal and it's well saved. That literally becomes from a long ball from a goalkeeper. But it's not a punt. It's not a, we're going to put a low percentage ball forward. Bournemouth have designed a strategy that allows them to work situations from their goalkeeper where they've overloaded the opposition shape and thus are more likely to win the second ball. But Iraola isn't just a kick and rush manager. He has other solutions too, using short passing combinations and triangles. Influenced by Marcel Bielsa, Bournemouth use these triangles all over the pitch, notably creating wide passing triangles to progress the play with quick combinations. What you'll tend to see with Bournemouth, of course, is that attacking midfielder will drift wide and get on the ball. One of the sides of the pitch that you tend to see that, of course, is the right, with the triangle with the right back, right winger and the attacking midfielder. On the left, what we tend to see is Scott, Truffert, and of course Brooks. But with the fluidity and motion and movement of Bournemouth, not only can they build in this kind of 4-1-4-1 structure, as we previously spoke about, but at times they'll have 2 defensive midfielders, both Adams and Scott in there, and Tavernier will rock over to the right-hand side, once again, to create a wide triangle. This flexibility of the Bournemouth side is why they're so difficult to play against. They can play over you, they can play through you, and they can play around you. Take this example against Newcastle United. Bournemouth slicing through Newcastle United. When they build, if they don't go long, they tend to go wide. And they create overloads in those areas with those triangles we mentioned before. So pick up the play with Bournemouth having the ball left centre-back in Senesi. He shifts it to right and instantly the ball is played out to the fullback. So that triangle we spoke about before, the right winger, attacking midfielder and right back, is a little drive inside, then a forward pass. Why Bournemouth are so nice to watch is they play forward when possible. They're a very vertical team, not only those long balls, but these incisive passes. Tavernier, the connector we spoke about previously, simply links the play and plays forward to Evanilson. One little thing we mentioned before, quick layoffs when it goes to the centre forward, which allows this situation. Off the ball, both the right back and Tavernier have made the run in behind the defence. And if Alex Scott's pass isn't intercepted, Bournemouth are in behind the defence. Great football from out the back. In terms of chance creation in advanced areas, Bournemouth stay true to Iraola's principles. They play quickly and they play direct. As a gegenpressing side, Bournemouth look to create chances by forcing turnovers and counter-attacking quickly. But in open play from the final third, Iraola still has attacking patterns. Generally, they look to create from the wide areas, notably using early crosses to a loaded box, overlaps, underlaps and third man runs to get in crossing positions near the byline, or simply through combination play in their wide triangles. If teams look to prevent this wing play by outnumbering Bournemouth, Iraola's men will come back inside and look to play direct, either with first time crosses and switches of play, but they'll also play through balls into the channels to get shots on goal. In a world of slow positional football, what's really refreshing about Andoni Iraola is how direct he plays. Bournemouth have a plan and attacking patterns, but it's all about being direct, either with passing or with direct dribbling, something highlighted by the man himself. We have to prepare patterns, but we cannot just prioritise them. If you can see that you don't have a teammate ahead, forget the pattern. Just drive the ball and try to force things to happen. I want him to attack first. A lot of the time we say it's a bad thing when a game becomes end-to-end, because generally the teams have lost control. What's unique about Iraola is that's the environment that he's trying to create. They want to keep the game as chaotic as possible because firstly, it's what they've trained for, so they're able to thrive in those situations. But secondly, they put their opponents in unfamiliar positions where pre-planned routines and patterns just aren't available. Another super important component for Iraola is Marcus Senesi. We saw against Newcastle the effort of Tonali to stop him playing forward. Possibly the best passing centre-back in the Premier League. He ranks in a lot of top percentiles for a lot of progressive metrics. Often he's the guy trying to break lines into the forwards with passes, but he's also the one that launches Bournemouth's kick and rush strategy. When Bournemouth do get into advanced areas as well, he's very important in those zones. You know, let's say that Bournemouth have worked the ball into the final third, they've won the second ball, and it's being worked back. Senesi will move high as the opposition drop a little bit deeper and once again become the playmaker in the final third. And we've seen him dictate in these zones. He truly is Iraola's deep-lying playmaker. Take Evan Ilson's winner versus Spurs. This encapsulates Iraola's style in possession. So we pick up the play with Bournemouth in their 4-2-4 structure. 6 a little bit deeper than the 8, but very much a front 4. This is to not only pin the opposition's backline, but is to become targets for those long balls. As the ball is moved to the left-hand side of the pitch, Senesi picks it up. He goads the press and then plays long over the top. Remember before we spoke about overloads when fighting for a second ball? As the balls clip forward, you can clearly see Bournemouth's men start to swarm around that zone. And you can see the flick is won by the Tottenham right back. He's in a good position, but his teammates aren't. Not only have Bournemouth closed the pitch, they've got their fullback high, their strikers moved into an area to win the second ball, the attacking midfielder is supporting as well. As the balls drop down, Evan Ilson directly plays forward. That layoff, that quick play when getting on a long ball, which allows Semenyo to get in behind the Spurs defence. There's some good movement off the ball from Truffet that takes the attention away from Semenyo that allows him to come back inside. That wing play we mentioned before, those wide interchangeable triangles. We've got a central midfielder, a fullback and a winger combining in unison. It's very, very good football. As the balls work back, Alex Scott kind of rides the pressure and drops it back to Senesi. So our playmaker has launched the attack and now he is back on the ball. As Senesi receives, you can see that Alex Scott has goaded the opposition central midfielder out of position to open up a little gap. And this through ball is brilliant. This is why I think Senesi is the best ball-playing defender in the league right now. These types of passes into the channel. The ball is fantastic. Evan Ilson gets into the box and he could drill a low cross for the attacking midfielder Marcus Tavernier to finish off the move. But instead, he takes a shot, it gets deflected and goes over the goalkeeper. But that is Bournemouth in a nutshell. The kick and rush strategy, the wide triangles to combine, and then of course Senesi playmaking in the final third. It's crazy to think Bournemouth have got so many weapons in that area, but their centre-back is probably the most dangerous. In fact, on Y-Scout, Senesi ranks first for through balls in the Premier League. The libero may be back. We've not even talked about Anton Semenyo, Iraola's top scorer and leading assister during his time at Bournemouth, and it's obviously a very talented player, but he's just another component. Albeit he's a very good component that fits the system very well, but the same can be said of most of Bournemouth's squad. It's this reason why Bournemouth are able to sell so many players but not drop off in the league. And if they can keep their backroom staff together as well as Iraola, Bournemouth will continue to be one of the best run clubs and most exciting teams in Europe. And Iraola is destined to be one of the best managers on the planet. His style is conducive a lot of things that I like in football. It's not the boring, slow possession of Pep Guardiola. It's direct, it's heavy metal football. And I think when you look at teams in the Premier League, Chelsea, Manchester United, two massive teams that could use someone like Iraola in the future. But anyway guys, I've been Statman Dave. If you are new around here, make sure to subscribe and of course, like the video. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, why not check out some more content on the Statman Dave YouTube channel.